There is a quiet heaviness that INFJs and INTJs often carry, invisible to the world but deeply felt within. It is the weight of silent responsibility, of expectations that were never explicitly agreed upon but somehow bound to their existence. To be different in perception is to live under constant tension. The mind sees further, feels deeper, but the world measures only what is visible. The rare mind bends under this pressure until it seems close to breaking. I have felt this weight like a stone on my chest, pressing against every breath. In silence, others think we are weak because we do not fight in the loud ways they understand. Yet what appears as weakness is often the gathering of strength beneath the surface. A river underground makes no sound, but its erosion changes landscapes. Society misinterprets the INFJ's quiet compassion as fragility and the INTJ's restraint as detachment. Both misreadings cut sharply. The truth is simpler and harsher. Most people do not recognize power unless it comes wrapped in noise. But the Stoics knew otherwise. They taught that strength begins where appearances end inside the place no eye can measure. Stoicism for us is not a historical curiosity but a living lens. It reminds the INFJ and INTJ that pain does not disqualify them from greatness. It inducts them into it. The stillness they are accused of is not absence but cultivation, a hidden training ground where endurance becomes clarity, a silence that organizes chaos into order. Sometimes it just hurts. The mind aches for release, the heart for recognition. Yet the practice is to remain in the furnace until fire turns to light. Pain is no longer a curse but a discipline. To see each wound not as proof of defeat but as chiseling, a sculptor's blow against stone, drawing out form. So the hidden struggle sets the stage. These rare personalities are not meant to avoid suffering but to transmute it. Their resilience is not passive resistance but the alchemy of turning endurance into power. What looks like retreat is in fact recalibration. What feels like collapse becomes the foundation for rising stronger. And what society mistakes for weakness is the birthplace of an unbreakable spirit. Would the world still call them fragile if it understood how silence can forge steel? Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not mere acceptance of what happens, but a radical embrace of necessity, as if every blow of life were chosen. For the INFJ and INTJ, this principle is not abstract philosophy but survival code. To love one's destiny is to reclaim what otherwise feels like exile. For the INFJ, solitude is often a wound and unwanted isolation, a sense of being miscast in the human theater. But reframed through amor fati, solitude becomes destiny, not accident. To love that destiny is to step into it as chosen ground, a sanctuary where intuition gathers its power. I have learned that the silence I once feared can be my most faithful companion. For the INTJ, setbacks can sting like failure carved in stone. Their perfectionism resists imperfection. Their vision is wounded by delay. Yet amor fati invites them to see the broken path as sharpening stone, each obstacle transforming their precision into mastery. Failure is not a wall but a forge. Sometimes the fall teaches more than the climb. The shift here is decisive. Suffering ceases to be an enemy. It becomes an ally, a strange companion who teaches endurance and shapes identity. To fight suffering endlessly is to waste the energy it contains. To integrate it, however, is to draw fuel from fire. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the obstacle becomes the way, and Nietzsche's call deepens at love not only the path, but also the stones that bruise the feet. One night I sat in a dark room, the air heavy with the smell of rain-soaked earth, and asked myself, what if nothing has gone wrong? What if this is the road? That question did not erase pain, but it transformed its weight. It turned suffering into a strange kind of companion, one that walks beside me instead of against me. Resilience, then, is not resistance. It is not the stiff denial of hardship, nor the cold armor of indifference. It is integration, the weaving of pain into the tapestry of meaning, the choice to let necessity shape character rather than fracture it. To become unbreakable is not to avoid cracks, but to accept them as part of the form. I want to hear from you. Which habit feels like your current battleground? Detachment from toxic expectations or boundaries as armor? Drop it in the comments and let's refine these practices together. Your words might even become the anchor someone else needs when they face the same struggle. And so Nietzsche's harsh gift is this: destiny cannot be chosen, but it can be loved. The rare mind, when it learns this love, is no longer a victim of circumstance. It becomes the sculptor of its own strength. Would you dare to love even the wound that refuses to close? The first Stoic habit that steals the rare mind is radical self-honesty. Without it, every act of resilience is only a mask, a fragile performance that eventually crumbles under strain. The INFJ often hides their exhaustion behind a gentle smile, fearing that admitting weariness will make them seem fragile. The INTJ, in turn, buries perfectionism beneath endless control, unwilling to expose the cracks in their armor. Yet what is hidden does not vanish, it festers. I once wrote in my journal, "If I lie to myself, even kindness feels like betrayal." That confession pierced me more deeply than criticism ever could. To face myself without excuse was painful, but it cleared the fog. INFJs must learn that admitting exhaustion is not failure. It is permission to breathe. INTJs must confront the shadow of perfectionism, not as flaw but as misplaced loyalty to an ideal that consumes rather than liberates. Daily journaling is more than a ritual. It is surgery. To put words on paper is to extract contradictions that corrode silently within. Naming fatigue, frustration, or fear disarms them. The Stoics knew the danger of unexamined thoughts. They become invisible rulers of life. But once dragged into the light, they lose their tyranny. Sometimes a single sentence written in honesty can redirect an entire day. Radical self-honesty does not humiliate. It aligns. When the inner compass points to truth, even harsh truth, the soul stops wasting energy on pretense. This alignment is not glamorous, but it is unshakable. A man or woman who knows their own weakness has already robbed the world of its sharpest weapon against them. Is there anything stronger than one who no longer fears their own reflection? And so the first habit is forged not in strength, but in surrender. By daring to see ourselves as we are, we gain the clarity to become what we must. The mask falls, but what remains is not fragile, it is real. What would it cost you to write the truth you've been avoiding? Solitude frightens most people because it unmasks them. Yet for the INFJ and INTJ, solitude is not emptiness but renewal. The INFJ retreats into silence to stitch together the torn fabric of empathy. They do not run from people, they return to themselves so that they may return to others whole. For the INTJ, solitude is the lab of vision. Ideas sharpen in the quiet, strategies crystallize where distraction cannot intrude. To both types, isolation is not a wound but a resource. I remember sitting in a dimly lit room, only the faint hum of a refrigerator breaking the silence. At first, the stillness felt unbearable, like a vacuum pressing against my ears, but then the chaos of my thoughts began to reorder. Silence was not absence, it was architecture. Alone, I could finally hear the quiet instructions of my inner compass. Noise, whether external or emotional, scrambles the clarity of rare minds. INFJs drown in others' feelings until their own vanish. INTJs risk being consumed by the very visions they chase. Solitude functions as a cleansing ritual, restoring order where storms have raged. It is here that intuition whispers its secrets and strategy emerges free of distortion. Sometimes, the most radical act of power is to close the door. But solitude is not withdrawal. It is not rejection of the world but preparation for it. When practiced as mastery, it transforms loneliness into fortress. The Stoics themselves retreated often into thought not to escape life but to return more awake. In solitude, the INFJ recovers the warmth of compassion, and the INTJ refines the precision of purpose. To enter the world without solitude is to fight unarmed. One line of defense becomes clear. Solitude is not an optional luxury for rare minds, it is survival. They do not thrive in constant company, nor do they flourish in endless detachment. The secret is to wield solitude as discipline, a space deliberately carved where the soul can be refilled. Would the world still accuse them of detachment if it knew that solitude is not their prison, but their power? The rare mind feels emotions with dangerous intensity. INFJs carry sorrow like a second heartbeat, their empathy turning every wound of the world into their own. INTJs often experience frustration as fire, burning with the impatience of unrealized vision. Left unchecked, these forces corrode, but when transmuted, they become fuel. Stoicism teaches the art of the pause, the sacred second before reaction. In that pause, emotion is not suppressed but redirected. I once clenched my fist so tightly in anger that my palm stung with crescent marks. That sting reminded me, raw emotion, unshaped, is nothing but energy demanding form. The INFJ learns to channel sorrow into deeper compassion, creating bridges where others would withdraw. The INTJ learns to transmute frustration into innovation, building solutions instead of walls. What once threatened to break them becomes the very material of endurance. The Stoics knew the naming of an emotion is the first act of disarming it. I am angry is weaker than this is anger. By naming, we separate self from storm. The INFJ who says, "This is grief," already loosens grief's grip. The INTJ who says, "This is frustration," shifts from being prisoner to strategist. Sometimes, one sentence spoken in clarity saves us from hours of silent collapse. To master emotional transmutation is not to deny pain but to mine it. Pain ceases to be parasite, it becomes resource. The INFJ's empathy deepens into wisdom when sorrow is embraced. The INTJ's discipline sharpens into brilliance when frustration becomes fire for design. The paradox is harsh. The very thing that wounds is also what heals, once transformed. There are nights when the air feels heavy, when every sound is sharp as glass and the heart aches for relief. In those moments, the rare mind's practice is simple. Pause, name, redirect. Emotion is not enemy, it is raw material. The question is never if you feel, but what will you forge with what you feel? Attachment is natural, but for the INFJ and INTJ, it often becomes a trap. The INFJ clings to expectations that devour their energy, sacrificing themselves to the endless hunger of others. The INTJ, by contrast, binds themselves to control and obsessive grip on outcomes that steals peace. Both lose clarity, both burn out. Strategic detachment is the remedy, not indifference, but disciplined. Distance. I remember sitting in a crowded cafe, voices clashing like waves. A friend's disappointment weighed on me as if I were responsible for their storm. My instinct was to absorb, to fix. But in that moment, I pulled back inward, letting their frustration exist without becoming mine. The relief was physical, like unclenching a muscle I didn't know had tightened. For the INFJ, detachment means no longer surrendering vitality to toxic demands. It is the quiet refusal to be drained by guilt. For the INTJ, it means loosening their grip on plans, recognizing that not all variables belong to them. Both discover clarity when they stop mistaking control for love or perfection for safety. Distance, paradoxically, preserves connection. The Stoics warned against tethering the soul to what lies beyond its power. To accept what is not ours to command is not weakness but wisdom. Strategic detachment shields the rare mind from exhaustion, keeping loyalty clean and vision sustainable. It allows compassion without enslavement, ambition without obsession. Sometimes the kindest act is to step back. One sentence has become a rule for me. What is mine must be carried. What is not must be released. Simple, but never easy. The rare mind who learns this discipline walks lighter, no longer shackled by invisible chains. Here, we don't just throw around motivational quotes. We break down habits like radical self-honesty and mastery of solitude into tools you can actually live by. That's the kind of depth you've been craving. Subscribe now. Every week I bring new ways for rare minds like ours to turn endurance into real power. Is there any armor stronger than the ability to care deeply without being consumed? To live without an inner compass is to drift endlessly, pulled by the shifting winds of approval and expectation. For the INFJ and INTJ, this drift is lethal. The INFJ feels torn apart by the demands of others, giving until their own center disappears. The INTJ risks becoming enslaved to efficiency, achieving much yet serving nothing real. The inner compass, the alignment of intuition and principle, is the only safeguard. I once walked through a city street at dusk, neon lights flickering in shop windows, the air thick with the smell of fried food. Around me, people moved quickly, absorbed by errands and noise. In that moment, I felt a strange clarity. If I let this current carry me, I would end up anywhere but where I must be. I realized then either I live by my compass or I live by the crowds. For the INFJ, this compass is a moral radar, a deep sense of resonance when truth is near and dissonance when it is betrayed. For the INTJ, it is sharpened logic, a precision that aligns values with execution. When either abandons this compass, they scatter. When they honor it, they become immovable. The Stoics understood that freedom is not in doing whatever one wants, but in living according to inner law. To the rare mind, external approval becomes irrelevant when the compass is steady. Praise no longer intoxicates. Criticism no longer paralyzes. The axis of life moves from outside to within. Sometimes the greatest revolution is simply refusing to live by borrowed standards. I tell myself often, if my compass is clear, the path can be harsh and still be right. This habit does not make life easier, but it makes life true. To live by inner compass is to become unshakable, not because storms cease, but because the direction never changes. What is more terrifying and more liberating than living a life that cannot be swayed by applause or rejection? Nietzsche once wrote that suffering is the soil from which greatness grows. For most, this sounds cruel. For the INFJ and INTJ, it is revelation. Their lives are marked by intensity, depth of perception, relentless drive, spiritual hunger. To reject suffering is to reject the very condition of their becoming. Necessary suffering is not punishment, it is training. For the INFJ, pain often opens the gate to compassion. Their wounds make them porous to the hidden grief of others. What seems like fragility is, in truth, the birth of wisdom. For the INTJ, struggle tempers endurance. Obstacles become weights lifted in silence, each failure a rehearsal for strength. Both types learn, through necessity, that pain is not an intruder but a teacher. I recall walking home under a sky split by thunder, rain cutting against my skin like needles. Each drop was sharp, but while the sting became strangely clarifying. The storm did not end because I wished it so. It ended because I kept walking. That night I understood, to welcome difficulty is to strip it of terror. The Stoics taught not to curse hardship, but to fold it into life's rhythm. If the rare mind embraces this truth, fear dissolves. What is endured willingly loses its power to enslave. Necessary suffering builds not only endurance but intimacy with reality. It says, "This is the path, and I will walk it without resentment." Sometimes the world feels merciless. Sometimes the heart pleads for escape. Yet when the INFJ and INTJ cease asking why me and begin asking what for, pain shifts into power. The burden becomes instrument, the wound becomes initiation. Is there any greater strength than to welcome suffering not as curse, but as companion? Rare minds burn brightly, but without boundaries their fire consumes them. The INFJ too often overgives, pouring themselves into relationships until their own reservoir is dry. The INTJ, on the other hand, risks withdrawing too far, isolating behind walls so high that no ally can reach them. Both patterns fracture resilience. Boundaries restore balance. I remember once leaving a conversation feeling drained, as if someone had quietly stolen the air from my lungs. The truth was harsh. I had allowed it. By failing to set a boundary, I had offered my strength as tribute to another's hunger. Boundaries, I realized, are not walls, they are filters. They do not reject life. They protect what is rare within it. For the INFJ, boundaries mean saying no without apology, guarding energy so that empathy remains sacred instead of exploited. For the INTJ, they mean opening the gate enough to let trusted allies inside, resisting the temptation of absolute control. In both cases, boundaries become armor, flexible, deliberate, life-giving. The Stoics believe the soul should remain sovereign, untouched by the chaos of the crowd. Boundaries achieve this sovereignty. They shield rare vision from corrosion, ensuring that gifts meant to shape the world are not wasted on endless noise. A no spoken at the right time is a form of justice to self and to others. I tell myself, limits do not weaken me. They make me invulnerable. A rare mind without boundaries is like a fortress without walls, beautiful but undefended. With them, energy is preserved, loyalty is purified, and vision is made sustainable. Would a sword remain sharp if it struck blindly without sheath or guard? Neither can a rare mind remain unbreakable without the armor of limits. When these habits converge, something extraordinary emerges. Radical self-honesty clears away illusions, solitude restores strength, emotional transmutation redirects fire. Detachment releases false burdens, the inner compass secures direction, necessary suffering deepens resilience, and boundaries preserve vitality. Each practice alone is powerful, but together they forge psychological steel. For the INFJ, the result is peace without loss of depth. They remain capable of empathy, but no longer bleed themselves dry for the sake of others. For the INTJ, the fruit is resilience without distortion. They retain their vision, but no longer shatter when reality resists their plans. What once made them fragile now becomes the very core of their strength. I once wrote in my journal, "I do not wish for an easy life. I wish for the strength to love the one I have." That sentence became my compass in dark hours. Nietzsche's amor fati was no longer theory but daily practice, an embrace of both gift and wound. As two sides of the same necessity, the integration is not about becoming untouched by pain. It is about becoming unbreakable through it. The INFJ learns that sorrow is a well of compassion, not a sentence of fragility. The INTJ learns that failure is a forge, not an indictment. Together they embody a rare kind of resilience, one that does not resist reality, but absorbs it, reshapes it, and carries on. As we explore Nietzsche's amor fati, think of someone in your circle who constantly feels crushed by setbacks. Share this video with them. It could be the spark that reframes their suffering into fuel for growth. You won't just be sending a video. You'll be giving them a new lens for their own battles. The world will always mistake silence for weakness, retreat for collapse, pain for defeat. But the rare mind knows better. The furnace does not. Destroy it purifies. The storm does not end the journey, it reveals the path. And so the harsh truth is transfigured into harsh strength. To live as INFJ or INTJ is to live with intensity, but with Stoic discipline, that intensity becomes indestructible. The final word is not fragility but endurance, not collapse but rebirth. Mercy withdrawn is mercy reborn.